Hello, thanks for tuning in. My name is Amira Shakur, and I'm the Program Associate with the Women's Democracy Network. I am joined today by Dr. Reka Smirkini, Transatlantic Senior Advisor at IRI, to bring to you the next episode of Fireside Chats, an interview series where we feature senior women leaders and chat about their career experiences and professional challenges so that we can share those insights with our members. First, a bit about WDN. For over a decade, we've built a platform to connect aspiring and experienced women leaders around the world and empower them to meaningfully participate and take on leadership roles within the political process. We have more than 5,000 members in more than 80 countries, and we've directly reached over 17,000 women through our trainings, conferences, and workshops. I'd like to join Reka in welcoming this episode's featured guest, Her Excellency Hunaina Al Mughairy, Ambassador of Oman. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Amira, and hello, everyone. Thank you also, my dear friend Hunaina, Ambassador Al Mughairy. I'm very pleased to have you. It's a fantastic opportunity for us to chat because you, as my guest today, is a very special person, a successful businesswoman, a successful diplomat, and a successful wife and mother. In all of the backgrounds that you have had a fantastic career and a fantastic, success and achievements. You presented your credentials to the President George W. Bush in 2005 and served until 2020 with distinction, one of the most impressive and leading personalities of the diplomatic corps in in Washington, D.C. And in addition to these achievements in themselves, you have been the first female Arab ambassador in Washington, D.C., which allowed you to have a very special message in addition to your work on strengthening U.S.-Omani relations, which is to work on improving and correcting the image or to dispel the American and international stereotypes about the image of Arab Muslim women in Washington, D.C. I think all of this background, you're starting in the business world, going over to diplomacy, gives us a very important treasure trove to discuss. So let me jump into the questions right away. Let me go back to the beginning. When you had your first nomination to a senior position, did you find that responsibility to be more difficult? Do you have any concern that it would be more difficult for you to fill that job in than it would be for a male colleague in the same position? Did you find it more difficult for you to get that position than it would have been for a male counterpart going for that position?
Thank you very much, Reka, Amira, and thank you very much for this very generous introduction. It's not only a pleasure, but it's an honor for me to be here with you this afternoon. Okay, let me take you back so that I can answer your questions properly, how I started my career, and if it was challenging, if it was a man or a woman. I had just come back from doing my master's from New York University in Oman. At that time, His Majesty Sultan Qaboos had just taken over. He had taken over from his father in 1970. So I came back in 1979, and right away I was given, before even asking for the job, we had very few Omanis at that time who had master's degrees. So when I came back, the Minister of Commerce and Industry, who was a friend, straight away said, we need an Omani to run a position of the Director of Industrial Loans and Grants. That position was held by an expatriate before, and they wanted to Omanize that position. And since I just came with a master's degree from New York University, I didn't even know what hit me, because there I was fresh from university, and I was given a job that not only would be challenging for a woman or even for a man, and it was a job at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And I was the only woman in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. To answer your question, the people who were entitled to get the loans and grants, as I was the director, were Omani citizens. So they were very excited that here was an Omani who was handling this position as opposed to an expatriate who's been handling this position. So they were happy that it was an Omani, regardless whether I was a man or a woman. So that in itself helped me to break the glass ceiling and come into this position. His Majesty Sultan Qaboos took over in 1970. And I looked up at him because he took over a country that was from his father, and we were really in the, I would say, 18th century. And in the 50 years that he reigned, unfortunately, he passed away this last year, last January. He took over and he modernized the country from the 18th century to the 21st century. He was very pro-women, very much encouraged women. And in his first speech, he said, women and girls are not far from our minds because we are like a bird with two wings. We can't fly with just one wing. So this is what he meant. Without the second wings, which are women, the bird would not be able to fly. So of course, we had a leader who was very progressive, and he encouraged us women. And of course, when he said that, we were all there ready and willing to support him and join him. Of course, I can't say that all the people would be pro-women. I'll be wrong in saying that. I'm sure between him and us, between His Majesty and us, there are some who are very conservative and are not happy for us to take over such senior positions.
Absolutely, I can imagine, but it really highlights the importance of men and women prioritizing working together, and I very much appreciate that. I think it's a very important point. Did you, going along, in this position over the years, did you find any particular additional difficulty that you think that women have to face?
Yeah. You see, of course, we have to, my generation is completely different from somebody like Amira's generation, which also I would say for my daughter's generation, or even my granddaughter who's already 12 in her generation. Things change and things are definitely going to be difficult. And then things are very cultural in some country, things are more progressive in other country. So we have to look at the country that we are in and how we address those problems. In the West, things are completely different. But if you look at from my region, from the Middle East right now, we really have come a long way, whereby in the early 70s, before the discovery of oil, we had very few schools. In fact, in Oman, we had only 2 schools for boys and no schools for girls. Still, His Majesty took over in 1970. So you can imagine from 1970 to now, where now we have women cabinet ministers, women in the Legislative Council, women in the Consultative Council, in the Ministry of Commerce, where I said I was the first woman then, I was the first and only woman. Now I would say about 50% of the people working in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry are women. So it is challenging, as I said, because still people have a lot of ideas that some jobs, some professions are just for men, but we should not allow that to put us down. We should always be professional and positive thinking. We should always ask if we don't know something, because that is something else that would encourage us and will improve our stand in front of our men colleagues. There's a lot of stories I can give, as I said, working in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, I would sometimes attend meetings with the minister, and being the only woman, I would be definitely, all my male colleagues, even though they were the same position, would allow me to sit next to the minister. So when we are talking about investments and we have a foreign investor coming with their team, of course, assuming that they're in an Arab country and here's this woman sitting next to the minister, very quiet, just taking down her notes and writing, they would assume I'm either the note taker or the secretary, until the minute the discussion starts and I open my mouth, then you can see the the surprise in their face, oh, she's a woman and she is not a secretary or a note taker. So my first advice to the young girls of today, whether it's in my region or any other region, is you have to be positive. You have to be very professional. That's very, very important.
Thank you, indeed, absolutely. Which brings us to another very interesting question, which you briefly mentioned. Do you feel that you had a mentor, kind of a person, someone who was inspiring you or helping you along the way?
You know, it's an interesting question, Reka. As I was the first Arab woman ambassador to the United States, okay? And as you have served in the United States, you know that ambassadorialship in the United States usually is very regional when it comes to the meeting, because I was in New York before coming to New York, to Washington, D.C. And in New York, all ambassadors met all the time, regardless of what region you were. Here, it's very regional. The European ambassadors met, the Arab ambassadors met, the African ambassadors met. It was the monthly meeting with the Arab ambassadors. And I assumed that my Arab colleague, when I took over as the first Arab woman in the United States to be an ambassador, my Arab colleagues just treated me as one of the boys. None of them went out of their way to say, okay, she's a woman, let me help her. No, I just have to be just professional. And they looked at me as one of the boys. So I would say, I would consider them one of the girls. So, you know, it was just, since I mentioned about my career as the first Arab woman ambassador, actually, I'm not a career diplomat, as I mentioned to you. My background is in commerce and industry, and I started over as in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And my husband is the diplomat in the family. When he got posted to New York, I had retired from the government. I said, you know, when I was in New York, I couldn't afford to do a lot of things that students cannot afford to do. But now my husband's the ambassador. I'll retire from the government and join my husband and do my own thing. The government asked me to set up the Center for Investment Promotion in New York. And so in that position, I was negotiating the free trade agreement with the United States. That was the time when Oman was negotiating the free trade agreement, because we had a lot of quotas. So I'm just mentioning that. So another part of my life where it had to do with commerce.
A very important one, because you were working on this, absolutely, until it was approved by US Congress. Yeah,
exactly. So let me go back to the story about how I managed to negotiate that. So anyway, His Majesty decided, since I was in New York and negotiating this, he said, why is she sitting in New York? And I was given the position of ambassador. And this is how I became ambassador to the United States, because I was one of the lead negotiators for the free trade agreement. And the thing that I'll mention, which also when I said, when we usually say, you know, things sometimes work against us because we say we are women. No, it kind of opened doors for me in a way, and I'll tell you why. The agreement had to go to Congress for an up and down vote. So I had to lobby the 435 congressmen and women, and then it had to go to the Senate to be approved. You know, as you know, Reka, the media here plays a lot of unfair information about the Arab women, how we are suppressed, how we don't have our rights. So when the congressman, one of the congressmen heard that there's an Arab woman ambassador, he wanted, you know, I asked to see him. I went to see him and I was with my male colleague. And as we walked in, first of all, he didn't know that it was going to be a woman. He made a beeline to my colleague. And then, of course, it was a little bit embarrassing. My colleague, who was a male, who was my deputy, said, no, she is the ambassador. And of course, there was all this apology. And I said, Congressman, do not apologize. I only need your vote. If you vote for me, I will apologize. I will accept your apology. So, you know, there's a lot of misconception about Arab women, unfortunately, but here I am and I lobbied the Congress, and people were very happy that I even spoke English when I went to see the Congress. So I have moved actually from industry to commerce to investment to being the first Arab woman ambassador to the United States.
Fascinating. I imagine how many more stories you have on this, and I wish, we had a chance. Maybe we will to continue and follow up on this discussion and have more concrete of the experiences. It's often I encounter that this is a very special feature, probably in the US more than even in Europe, that there are a number of women organizations. But you mentioned to me that you have not been working with any of these women organizations in your field, either in business or in diplomacy. So I think it's that's understandable. But I would like to ask, more about your experience as a diplomat, you and as a business person, previously. So you say that the fact that you were a woman, once you got the job, once you got the nomination, was more helpful than a difficulty. How was it before you got it? Did you assume that you were going to be taking leading positions, and it was something that you were absolutely sure of when you were at the beginning of your professional life?
Sure. First of all, I do apologize that, it is really unfortunate that I didn't work with women organization. And the thing is, unfortunately, we didn't have many women organizations when I was starting my career in Oman. And when I came to the United States, I was really very busy doing a lot of political promoting Oman. So I didn't have much time to work with women organizations. I was invited a few times to speak to them as being the first Arab woman ambassador. Now I have to make a point here. Arab women, there were a lot of Arab women ambassadors in other countries in the world, except that nobody has sent a woman to the United States. And that I was just very lucky to be the first one, but there were Arab women ambassadors in other parts of the world. And that kind of made me work extra hard, because I know I was not working for Oman only. I was representing all the Arab women ambassadors, because had I failed, they would have said, we sent a woman there and she could not make it. So after me, Bahrain sent a woman ambassador. Jordan now has a woman ambassador, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Morocco. So I kind of opened the doors for all the other women. To tell you the truth, I got the position by default. When I say I got the position as an ambassador, I didn't really look into getting the position as an ambassador. I was working very hard, just making sure that we get the free trade agreement between Oman and the United States. So that came as a reward, and it was a pleasant surprise, and it was a great honor for me to be appointed as ambassador. Going back, I can tell you, my mother never even went to school. So here I am, a woman who's the first, my sisters, I have two sisters, both my sisters and I were, my mother knew the value of education. So we both went to school. Now I have a master's degree. My daughter's working on her PhD. So you can see that things are changing for women from the time when my mother, who never went to school, and then you have her daughter, which is I, with a master's degree, and my daughter who's working on a PhD. So you can see the generation that is changing in the Gulf, and I'm sure it's in a lot of other countries that maybe people are not aware of.
Absolutely, very important, I think, how this develops, because we inherited from the previous generations the support and positions and possibilities in academia, in our degrees that are better than the previous generations.
Absolutely.
We would like to support the generations coming after us to the same way to get further ahead. So I think it's really a generational game also.
Oh, definitely. Things are really, Reka, during my generation, things were not very easy for women. We did the groundwork for the young generation that are coming up now. Women have more rights. As we mentioned earlier on, I was the first woman in industry in Oman. So of course, when they were doing the laws, and this is a new country that was developed, it's an old country, but with a new administration being there weren't women around to start thinking about maternity leave, and things have changed. Things have changed in Europe. Things have changed in the Scandinavia, where now men get maternity leave the same way women get maternity leave. So of course, I'm not sure what it's like in the United States, but going back to when I was negotiating the free trade agreement and I was in New York, I was a little bit disappointed that in the United States, not in the government, but in corporate United States, women at that time when I was in New York were not getting the same pay and the same salaries as men. And this is the United States. That made me a little bit disappointed because, you know, coming from Oman, where now a woman gets the same salary and same benefit as a man, as long as you're doing the same job. But then, you know, there are a lot of things that people are not aware of. If you look at the region, the Far East and Oman, where I'm coming from, okay, in the United States, we have a lot of women in the cabinet, but they've never had a president or a vice president. It's only now in 2021 that they have a woman as a vice president. When you look in the Far East, we look at Indonesia, look at Bangladesh, look at Israel, look at India. For years, look at Sri Lanka. Women are quite advanced and they had women presidents and women prime ministers. So things are changing. I was very happy to see that Kamala Harris is the first vice president, and who knows, she may be the next president. We never know. Things are just moving, you know. It could be her, it could be somebody else, but now that America has the first vice president, very soon we may have a woman president.
Absolutely. Things are changing for the better if we're working on them, right? If we just let them happen, then you can never know.
But it's very important that we should work on them. We should work on them. It is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is my next question, which is really based on this idea to work on them. What would be, if you were asked, you know, by one of the participants of our programs, what would you give as like the most important, you know, 3 pieces of advice based on your experience to women who are in this succession of, you know, generations and the situation getting better, hopefully in many ways, but still, what would be your advice for our participants?
Okay. You know, there could be more than three answers, but I'll just make it short for you. The first thing is the woman, for a young woman, you have to be positive, you have to be confident, you have to be professional. Don't be afraid to ask. There is no shame in asking, because sometimes you may feel, oh, if I ask, they'll think because I'm a woman. No, you should always be confident in your position. You have to earn it, of course, but I think being professional and confident is very, 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 very important. Once you know what you are doing, the sky's the limit. That's my advice.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. I really appreciate that.
I'm sure you've gone through that, Rekha, yourself. So you know that, I mean, you've gone through the different, you are an ambassador, but that's not your background and you became an ambassador. But I'm sure you can say that as long as you're confident, you're professional, and you know what you're doing, no one can intimidate you. This is very, very important.
It is very important, absolutely. And I think also what you say about your professionalism, that we have to be very highly professional. There is.
Absolutely. We have to work hard. It's not easy, because sometimes, you know, when I say things have changed for women right now, which is true, they have changed, but there are still those between us and progress, some men who still are not happy with what we are achieving. There are still some men who, in different parts of the world, who feel a woman's place is at home. We have to change that, and it depends on us women to do that.
Absolutely. We had this, you know, I was also, as you said, in a professional career, in very specifically in energy security, for instance, or security in general. I had that feel that at every professional event, you know, as a woman participant, you would always have to not be there, 100% level of sort of professionalism, but 150, just to be able to sort of be on equal, on pairs with everybody else at the discussion table. I guess if your experience is very similar from what I hear.
Absolutely, yeah. It is definitely important to be very professional. Confident is another thing. You have to be very confident in what you're doing. Don't choose a career that you don't have your expertise. You should be confident and accept something that you will be able to be a success in it.
Wonderful. Well, this is a wonderful note to end our discussion on, because I think this is a very important message and a very important experience that we could gain from you. So thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. It's been fantastic to get your insights and your experience, and I really appreciate it, and I look forward to continuing the discussion, hopefully in the future as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Amira. Best of luck, Amira. You have 2 women ambassadors here with you, so we hope to see you as one of the guests very soon. And best of luck in your career. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador, for your time. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into Fireside Chats for this episode.
Thank you.
Connect with us on Twitter and on Facebook at WDN, and we will see you next time. Thanks all.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.